The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners.
The Oklahoma Sooners added another quarterback, Jay.
I was a little bit shocked, while at the same time understanding the strategy. You need multiple quarterbacks in your room that can be healthy, just in case of emergency situations, as in, injury bug hits you or something. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen to us. But no, it made sense for Brent Venables and Ben Arbuckle to think, I think we should add one more body out there to play quarterback. And the one they got is a very intriguing one. Cole Gonzalez, man, as I'm looking at him more and more, there's some very intriguing components to his game.
Yeah, so he's thrown for a lot of yards at the collegiate level. I mean, this is a kid that has more than threw for more than 2,500 yards in 2024. In 2023, he threw for 5 touchdowns in 3 different games. This season alone, in week 8 against Furman. So if you're looking for a highlight tape to go watch of our guy, go watch the Furman tape. He threw for 620 yards and 5 touchdowns. So it's a dude that has thrown a lot of passes in 22 games over 3 seasons, threw for more than 6,000 yards, 49 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions. So I don't know. It's an intriguing option, and I know a lot of people are going to scoff at he played at the FCS level. Cam Ward was at FCS, Incarnate Word, before ending up at Washington State. Josh Heupel was at Weber State before he went to somewhere else, Snow College, and then before he ended up at Oklahoma.
Utah State,
dude, the FCS, yes, it's not the highest level of college football, but that doesn't mean there can't be some diamonds in the rough down there.
Yeah, there's always one or two there that you're going to find inside of there, and if you find the right one and you find that diamond in the rough, boom, you can go. It's kind of funny, John, as you're talking about some of the other players from like a Cam Ward to a Josh Heupel who went for FCS up back into this level. A lot of people were scuffing at your tweet that you talked about Oklahoma going the Moneyball route. And what people forget about the Moneyball game wasn't that it was just about being cheap. The goal was to find production that actually already exists and leverage that within the calculations of the way the lineup should look. So you're looking for players that if I lose out on 30 receptions for 600 yards, you're going to try to find a guy that has produced 30 receptions to 600 yards to bring in to replace said production. We were losing out on a lot of production. We didn't lose out on very much production, actually, in a lot of the players that we lost, besides like a Bowers Sharp, who was critical. And then, of course, our quarterback room took a massive hit. You're replacing it with production that has actually shown on the field, because most likely in that scenario, those players are going to actually still produce something when they come out there. They've already tasted the game. They understand how much faster the collegiate level is in comparison to high school. So when Brent Venables and staff is looking at guys that don't feel like they are game breakers, it's probably because there's not very many of them in the portal anyway, but you're looking for production and you don't want to stifle development. Adding a player like Cole Gonzalez, like I said, gives you a quarterback that plays. And there's the one thing that I think a lot of people are overlooking in this scenario. If Michael Hawkins does not win out in this quarterback battle, in which there is a chance, I'm going to give him about a 30% chance to win this out. So I'm being very generous. If he does not win this out, the goal is for him to redshirt. You want to preserve that redshirt that he lost last year as a true freshman, so that if John comes back one more year or John decides to leave, Mateer does, Michael Hawkins can go ahead and step right there in the reins. On top of that, though, John, think about it this way. Something happened to John Mateer. Do you want Michael Hawkins to go out immediately, or would you like a guy that has a whole bunch of throwing experience to go out there first? I take a guy that that's thrown the ball a lot, that also hasn't been injured. So don't you dare throw Casey Thompson at me, people.
I also like the idea of having a veteran that can run my scout team. At the very minimum, if Cole Gonzalez just comes in and runs the scout team, it's going to make the defense better. It's going to make the guys that are playing on the scout team, your wide receivers, your tight ends, everybody on that unit better because you've got an experienced dude. You're not leaving it to Jetinu, who I think he's got talent, but he's a very inexperienced guy because he's going to be a true freshman at the collegiate level. So I like that you're bringing in a veteran for that aspect. And listen, I think what Ben Arbuckle is looking for, he's looking for system fits. And while you might be able to find a system fit in the transfer portal from the Division I level, from the FBS level, from the SEC, he believes all these guys that they're bringing in are going to be system fits for him. And Cole Gonzalez is going to be a system fit. So I think at minimum, you're bringing a veteran scout team quarterback. You bring in potential backup to John Mateer for 2025 if the goal is to redshirt Michael Hawkins. And then you just bring in more competition. Like, if competition and competitive depth is always the goal, then you can't just rest on laurels and say, no, we've got our 3 quarterbacks, we're going to roll with it. We've seen, I mean, look at Florida. Like, Florida was a team that was battered by injuries. They lost their starter, and then they lost DJ Lagway for a minute, and then we're having to go to their third string guy that had played at Yale the year before. So having some veteran depth, having that experience at quarterback, even if he's your third quarterback, that's fine. You at least have that experience that you can bring in an emergency situation. But if not, then you've got a guy that still has that experience that can help run your scout team, help your team develop off the field.
Yeah, especially a guy that has already read through collegiate level defenses or offensive play calling. So Ben Arbuckle can spend time with a Cole Gonzalez as well as a Jetinu and Michael Hawkins really getting up to speed together. And usually the one that figures it out the fastest is the one that you'll see the most. But to your point, a scout team quarterback that has experience throwing it against defenses really does help. It helps a lot more than people understand. It's the psychological move from the high school level to the collegiate level where you're definitely going up against guys that are bigger, faster, and stronger than what you dealt with at high school, even at FCS. Like, I mean, we can make jokes as much as you want to, but truth be told, when you get into the FCS range, that's still the top 20% of high school players to play in the country, not just in the state, in the country. So you're still playing against some of the top talent. They just did not make it to the FBS level, which is the 1% of guys that are in the high school ranks across the country. And so I think Cole, like you said, he'll come in, he'll do a really good job of adding depth, not only competitive depth, but also add a component for the scout team to where you'll have a dude that's willing to throw the ball. Now, they probably throw the ball in practice in a way. We didn't really see much throwing in the games that we would have liked to have seen. Now you're going to have a dude that's going to force everybody to figure out how to throw the ball early and often. And I like the way seeing that Cole Gonzalez knows how to command an offense, especially putting up the numbers like you pointed out. I mean, multiple 5-touchdown games, a 600-yard game this past season. And against NC State, he wasn't that bad when the numbers I saw you put out there.
Yeah, so he threw for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns against NC State. And listen, that was a pretty solid NC State defense. He also ran for 78 yards on 6 carries. So he's got a little bit of scoot to him too. So intriguing little dual threat option. I mean, nobody's going to confuse him for Kyler Murray, but an intriguing option in that light. Again, another FCS quarterback to mention before we get out of here on this topic, Diego Pavia was playing at New Mexico State last year. Dude turned out pretty good, right? Turned out pretty good.
He's all right. But he did do us a solid though. Getting that injunction right now for JUCO's got a waiver for some guys to be able to come back, and we talked about that last show. So yeah, that's actually pretty good thing to hear about.
So heroes come in all sizes, even from the FCS level.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
After 3 transfer portal additions, how will Florida State's 2025 offensive line look?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Florida State has now got a former head coach as its OC and Gus Malzahn that wants to run downhill. They're not only adding experienced and talented players like Adrian Medley, Micah Pettis, Gunnar Hansen, they're bringing in guys that have shown quality ability to be frontline starters for their programs. This could be one of the biggest turnarounds in the history of the FBS in terms of a really bad offensive line. And I personally think Florida State had the worst in the Power Four, prove me wrong, to at least middle of the pack, if not one of the top 25 to 35 lines in the country, if they finish with 1 or 2 more really good portal players. And the way they've started, there's reason to believe that they could end up in that group. So we'll see, but they have far exceeded my expectations. And if you're a Florida State fan anywhere, you should be pretty proud of how quickly this has turned around. So I have a few questions and some comments, but let's break down what they've gotten so far. Again, Gunnar Hansen, tackle from Vanderbilt. This is a guy that could play left or right tackle because they signed Micah Pettis, the young man that just committed from Ole Miss. Got multiple podcasts on him up already. Here at Locked On Seminoles, download it, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. You have the opportunity now to have both your tackles lined up, and we're not even to January. A lot of schools are still looking for their first tackle. So again, shout out to Florida State for getting that done. Also, Adrian Medley. He was a starter for UCF this last year at interior offensive line. He could probably play any of the 3 interior spots. That's a great situation because if Florida State does use Jalen Early or Andre Otto, and we'll definitely get into them here in a few minutes, that gives you flexibility. Whichever one of those young guys breaks through, or somebody else, maybe it's Lucas Simmons, whatever, having experienced players like Adrian Medley will allow Norvell and his entire staff to mix and match all the way through spring ball to find the best combination of 5 players. And for the love of mankind, it would be nice, but I'm not going to count on this, if Florida State could be healthy next year up front on the offensive line. I mean, the last 2 years, even in 23, when Florida State was really good, they struggled up front because so many guys were banged up. Like Big Mo at center was hurt a lot. But if that does happen again, having a guy like Medley, having a guy like Hansen, et cetera, that have played different roles is really important. And I also think Pettis could absolutely move inside, and he might be a guard at the NFL level. Who knows? But right now, Florida State has 3 guys that are important. I think all 3 will start for the Florida State Seminoles in 2025. So they are your building blocks. But do not completely write it in ink at which spots these guys are going to go. Again, got to go through spring ball. You have to see who else you add. And there's always those guys that are on your roster that kind of move up the ladder. So a few things here that I want to bring up under one basic question. How much does Florida State feel confident that some of the returning players can be capable starters? Not just, okay, this is the best we have, we're going to throw this guy in here, blah, blah. Like, do they have guys that feel are capable starters right now? No projection, no getting better, where they are right now. I would say that there isn't anybody definitive because while Jalen Early is the guy I would lean towards if I had to pick one, he got banged up towards the end of the year. He played in 8 games. We'll go over some of his stats momentarily. But they have to look at it like, worst case scenario, we need at least a couple more guys from the portal. Maybe not all of them start, but we need to have some guys that, A, are good, have some position flexibility, but B, they have multiple years of eligibility. Remember, Florida State just signed 2 offensive linemen in the class of 25. That's not enough. Mario Nash Jr., by the way, I have extremely high expectations for the young man out of DeKalb, Kemper County, I believe, DeKalb, Mississippi. Really good player, but you don't want to rely on freshmen. I expect him to get into the rotation, but I doubt he's going to beat Gunnar Hansen out at left tackle or Micah Pettis at right tackle. As a sophomore / redshirt freshman, I would expect Mario Nash to be in the starting lineup. We'll see. But with that in mind, you need a couple more portal guys. So to that, you got Jalen Early, you got Andre Otto, TJ Ferguson. Is he coming back? I don't know. Bryson Estes, Richie Leonard, some of these guys, because of all the rulings, and you can look it up. I'll briefly mention it here. The JUCO ruling, The NCAA just put out they're going to get sued again. I can see it a mile away. Any kid that played NAIA or JUCO ball, it gets another year of eligibility. Well, what if you played 2 years of JUCO? You want to get one for that? Yeah, I smell the lawsuit a mile away with the NCAA. And for those of you that are lawyers out there, I'm sure you're shocked by that. With that point, I don't know who's all coming back for the Noles. The eligibility situation, some guys haven't hit the portal yet. Maybe they will. Maybe they want to go through spring ball. There are a gazillion questions about the returning players. But again, early, Lucas, Otto, those are three guys I think they'll be in possible starting situations. TJ Ferguson start again. Does he come back? All of those things have to be worked out. It is incredibly difficult. But to that end, I want to also mention again, Florida State must get more guys with multiple years of eligibility. And to that, I want to shout out, there was somebody that on the YouTube page, on the comment section that brought up, hey, Micah Pettis could play 2 years at Florida State. That would be great. Getting some continuity at offensive tackle would be enormous for the Florida State Seminoles. I don't care if it's right or left tackle. Pettis, that would be good. Now, Medley and Hanson, I believe they just have one. I could be wrong, but again, with the eligibility situation going on at the NCAA, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to try to project too much. So I also think in addition to the three young men they've already got committed from the portal, they need the following at minimum. Number one, they need another tackle that can play later on down the road. Not necessarily a guy that's going to come in and beat out Hanson, but somebody that has talent that could play tackle. If he's a swing guy that could play guard and tackle like Pettis, that's okay. Secondarily, another interior guy, especially we're talking about guys with multiple years of eligibility, if he's snapped before. Now, I'm fully aware that what I'm asking right here, just about every program in the country is looking for that. Centers are not easy to find. That is a unique position. That being the case, Florida State needs one. And if they can get a guy that can at least be taught it, Herb Hand's an excellent offensive line coach. I have full faith that he'll figure that out. But if they could do that, it would be great. In my world, I would take 6, but I just want to bring up one question before we go into the final segment. How much of them not going for 6 offensive linemen might be because of NIL? As I talked about on the show on Christmas Eve, the money that's being shelled out right now with NIL is incredible, and it's because of the House ruling, at least in theory, according to the CBS article I brought up yesterday's pod, because everybody has to spend that money by the end of June for your year allotment in half the time. Because once allegedly, at least, because this could change, once the House settlement is in, the money is going to be shifted. Every school has X amount of dollars, like FBS, for their athletic departments. Probably about 2/3 of that stuff will go towards football for most major programs, Florida State included. But it's a little more controlled. The way I take it, and this, I could be wrong on this, and there could be certain nuances that play out in the future. These collectives, like the Battle's End, et cetera, for Florida State, aren't going to have much, if any, control. I don't know the full cap on it, but it sounds like they want to spend the money, just about every Texas, Florida State, Miami, whoever, by June 30th. So they might be dipping in to the portal for a whole bunch of O-linemen now, but maybe they want to save something for after spring. Maybe there's another position beyond receiver. Obviously, Deuce Robinson helps, but it's not lock, stock, and barrel on how that's going to go. Every school's got to figure that out, and it's really, really fascinating.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And you can make that wager on some crucial NFL games. The Cincinnati Bengals are not dead yet. They're favored by 3 points in a massive showdown against Denver on Saturday. The Falcons, who somehow hold tiebreakers and lead the NFC South, are 4-point underdogs at Washington on Sunday. Just 4 points at home against rookie quarterback. Something to think about in that one. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
What coaching changes could we expect from the Florida Gators for 2025?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
This is speculative, okay? Purely speculative about what changes we can expect or should expect or can see. And I will say this one as well. First thing we're talking about is an offensive coordinator. That's the thing that we've been talking about for Florida Gators fans for a while now. And again, I want to make this abundantly clear. I think the Florida Gators need a play-calling offensive coordinator. I specify a play-calling offensive coordinator because I don't care if you're bringing in someone who's a scheme guru. I don't care. Like, I would have loved Brennan Marion. Congratulations for getting the job at Sac State. You're going to do great there. I don't need someone who's going to come in and reinvent the wheel with this team, right? This is your championship window. The scheme is fine. I've told you this a million times. The scheme's fine. It is. I know you may disagree, but it's perfectly fine. The play calling stinks. That's the issue. Okay? So the scheme's fine. Play calling stinks. Billy Napier just getting someone that's better at calling plays than him would make this team so much better and raise the ceiling for this team so much higher. On top of that, it is, and I'm going to exclude the bowl game from this because the bowl game should not count because we know why there were so many issues there. But pretty consistently throughout this year and throughout Billy Napier's entire tenure, the Florida Gators have burned timeouts to avoid delay of game penalties, to avoid these silly little things, right? The 12 men, 10 men, the delay of games, the play call just coming in late and then not being able to get situated and that turning into a train wreck. We've seen that far too often. Billy Napier hiring a play calling offensive coordinator would allow him to focus on more of the head coach things. Avoid a game like Miami where your team does not show up. Avoid a game like Texas A&M where your team does not show up. You avoid the games where your team does not show up if you are allowed to focus more on getting them ready to be football players. That's the biggest reason Billy Napier needs an offensive coordinator, right? And I will say this as well. I would love to say that there is going to be a hire here. I was told they've been speaking with people, and I know that the rumors that come out all the time are, Cade Bell's always thrown out there, and Garrett Riley's been thrown out there in the past couple weeks, and I saw Lincoln Riley on Twitter earlier this week, and there's going to be a bunch of names thrown out there. We can have a conversation in a couple days about actually getting that done and talking about potential OC hires. But I will say also that last year we were told, hey, Billy Napier needs to hire an offensive coordinator, and that didn't happen either. So this year, I'm not getting my hopes up as much. I do believe it more this year than last year. But again, I've been hurt before. I'm skeptical. On the defensive side of the ball, the rumor for months has been that Ron Roberts would be gone, right? Again, rumor. This is speculative, but the rumor is that Ron Roberts will be gone. I also said, I think it was November 30th, I sent a message to the Locked On Gators Insider program. I said, hey, I think Austin Armstrong is going to be gone. That happened. And insiders knew about it 2 weeks before it happened. So just saying. That being said, you need to replace them, right? If Ron Roberts does leave, you need to replace him because you would have lost both of your defensive coordinators. Personally, I wouldn't hate the idea of bringing in someone that is also from that Ron Roberts coaching tree. And I'm talking big game hunting here, right? If we're talking about someone from the Ron Roberts coaching tree, I'm headed to Oxford, Mississippi right now. I'm dialing it up and I'm saying, hey, Pete Golding, you want to come to Gainesville? Pete Golding he is from the Ron Roberts tree. At least that's how I look at him, because he was at Delta State under Ron Roberts like 15 years ago. He spent like 6 years there. So a lot of time under Ron Roberts. The scheme is very similar. Think that Pete Golding has, I don't want to say a better pass rush plan, but as far as the whole, edge rushers hate dropping in coverage as often as they do, which I understand. You understand that, hey, we got to drop in coverage every now and then. It's part of the scheme. But I do also understand the side saying, hey, dropping in coverage 30% of my pass defense snaps is not exactly what I want to do. So I get that. You could also look for someone with experience in the system, like a guy who was here last year in Jay Bateman, someone that there are people who believe he is a candidate. I'm sure there are also outside candidates that we can talk about in the coming days, or maybe not the coming days, whenever we get confirmation of Ron Roberts staying or leaving, we can have a conversation about potential replacements. But personally, Pete Golding would probably be at the top of my list. I said when people were talking about firing Billy and hiring Lane, I was saying, hey, bring Pete Golding with you. Like just bring him with you and you're right back on track, right? A lot of the players can run this system. He's a good schemer, good play caller, in my opinion. Go get him. And then, of course, yes, there's people who talk about Jay Bateman as a potential add there. Little skeptical just because of how messy his departure got, which if he is the hire or if he is a legit candidate, we'll go a bit further into that. But yeah, coordinator changes back to back years for defense wouldn't be awesome. However, I'm cool with it. In this instance, in an offensive coordinator, I think you need to hire one. When we look at offensive assistants that could be leaving this coaching staff, there's really two that I look at, right? I don't think Jabbar Jalouf's going anywhere, nor do I want him to go anywhere. Think he's earned his keep. Think he's earned the right to be here. I know, he doesn't land 5 stars all the time. Every running back he gets contributes. I'm cool with it. One guy that I do think could be getting the boot is wide receiver coach Billy Gonzalez. His contract is up, and I do believe that they're going to move on from him, and I'm not shaken up about it. Look, I think Billy Gonzalez, pretty good developer. I do think he's a good wide receiver coach. I don't think he's a great recruiter, right? And I know that there's people that are like, Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown III. Like, look at the receiver class. Yeah, look at the receiver class. But look at Billy Gonzalez's usual receiver recruiting. And it's not often that he's bringing in these elite blue chip players on his own, right? It's a lot of times been for other reasons. Vernell Brown III was a legacy that wanted to go to Florida. There was a very clear indication he wanted to go to Florida. He's there. More importantly, I don't know if they go outside for the hire at receiver coach if they get rid of Billy Gonzalez. But if they are sticking internally, there's 2 assistants there. There's Chad Lucas and there's Coach Decker, David Decker. Chad Lucas is the guy that you should swing on, right? He's the guy that you take your shot on. You say, hey, you're going to be our wide receiver coach. As far as recruiting goes, and here's another thing, a lot of the assistants can recruit. That's just how it is. A lot of the assistants work on recruiting, and they talk to kids, and they build these relationships with these players. It happens a lot. Okay, so Chad Lucas is the guy that they should swing on. Billy Napier is a wide receiver coach at his core. Like, he'd be able to help there if you don't feel like Chad Lucas is doing well enough. I think he would be fine. So there's that. And then there's the offensive line. Those are the only 2 spots that we're talking about. I've said for a month or so now that I think they part ways with Rob Sale. Have said for even longer than that they should part ways with Rob Sale. I think what happens is that Rob Sale leaves for whatever role he's going to go to next. And then Jonathan DeCoster gets promoted to be the offensive line coach. That's just, again, this is me speculating. But when you look at, and this goes back again for a month or so that I noticed it, when you look at what the Florida Gators were recruiting on the offensive line, and then you see the primary recruiter and the secondary recruiter, a lot of the guys that Florida was actually in on, it was Jonathan DeCoster as the primary and Rob Sale as the secondary. And I don't think that that was a coincidence. I think that you could be able to look at that and say, hey, maybe there's a plan, right? Maybe their plan is we're going to have Jonathan DeCoster be our offensive line coach. And so he should be the primary recruiter. Or Rob Sale is going to be leaving. Jonathan DeCoster will be here, even if he's not the offensive line coach. So he should be the primary recruiter of the bunch. It would make sense if the guy that is going to be coaching these kids is the guy that's primarily recruiting these kids. There is also a possibility that is less fun, a possibility that I don't like as much, but I will accept as a possibility. Again, not that I will accept and like it, that I will accept that it may be a possibility, that it may be part of the plan there, but that because Jonathan DeCoster has been listed as the primary recruiter on a lot of guys, which is, again, how I'm basing a lot of this, but if Jonathan DeCoster is just the better recruiter, and so they want Jonathan DeCoster to be more of the recruiting offensive line coach, and Rob Sale is more of the on-field guy, maybe that's a possibility, but I do think that that is the least likely scenario in this situation. Just because I don't think it makes a ton of sense to have one offensive line coach do all the recruiting and sell the university and sell this football team and sell this coaching staff to kids, only for them to not be anyone that works with you, right? Because that just doesn't make a ton of sense to go, yeah, I'm going to make sure your kid's right. I'm going to make sure this. I'm going to make sure that. And then once they get on campus, you've got nothing to do with them, right? It just doesn't make sense to me there. So that's why I think it's a possibility, and I can see them taking that approach, but just from the outside looking in, it doesn't sound like it makes a ton of sense, right? At least that's from my perspective there. Either way, I do think that Rob Sale will be gone. That's been a thing that we've been talking about for a long while there. But yeah, that's how at least I look at this offensive line, this offensive coaching staff shaking up. I don't think that you see a ton of turnover, but I do think if we're going to wide receiver coach and offensive line coach, we'll probably be mixed up in there. And maybe, this is again purely speculative, but hopefully Florida will have, hear me out, crazy, zany idea. One offensive line coach in 2025.